Hello everyone, and welcome to Veil of Shadows. I know many of you use these videos to relax and drift off to sleep. So before you let your mind wander into the world of dreams, I'd love if you could take a moment to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. It's always fascinating to hear from listeners all around the world. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more spine-chilling stories. Story 1. I was home alone that night. A rare and much-needed moment of solitude after a long, exhausting week. The house was eerily quiet. The only sound, the low hum of the refrigerator. I sat on the couch, bathed in the dim glow of the television, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, their skeletal branches swaying in the darkness. But inside, it was too still. At first, I didn't notice it. Maybe I didn't want to. But then, something shifted in the periphery of my vision. A figure. A dark silhouette just beyond the window. My breath hitched. I blinked, telling myself it was just a shadow. A trick of the dim streetlight outside. But no, it was there. It wasn't moving. It was just watching. A chill slithered down my spine. The blinds were partially drawn, obscuring the details, but I could feel its presence. Silent, unrelenting. My pulse quickened as I strained to make out any features, but all I could see was the vague outline of a person standing deathly still. Every rational thought in my head told me it was nothing. Just a passerby. Maybe someone pausing to check their phone. But then, 3 sharp knocks. The sound shattered the silence like a gunshot. I jolted, my breath catching in my throat. The knocks were deliberate, too precise. Not the hesitant tapping of a lost stranger. No. Whoever was out there wanted me to know they were there. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I stared at the window, the darkness beyond pressing in like a living thing. My fingers trembled around my phone. Call someone, call anyone. But I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. And then, again, 3 knocks. The same pattern, the exact unchanging rhythm. A sickening dread coiled in my gut. I backed away from the window. Careful, slow, trying not to make a sound. My skin prickled with the undeniable sensation of being watched. The air in the room felt heavier, suffocating. The door was locked, wasn't it? I should check. But moving felt wrong. Like the moment I turned my back, something would be inside with me. The knocks came again. Louder, more insistent. The sound seemed to seep into the walls, into my bones. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. A shudder racked my body. The longer it went on, the more unnatural it felt. The house, my house, felt smaller. Like the walls were closing in. I tried to convince myself it was just some prank, some idiot messing around. But deep down, I knew better. There was something wrong about this. About the way they stood so still. About the rhythm of the knocks. Too perfect, too unnatural. And then, silence. The absence of sound was worse than the knocking itself. The quiet stretched on, pressing against my eardrums, making my own heartbeat sound deafening. I counted the seconds, barely daring to breathe. 5 minutes, 10. Maybe it was over. Maybe... Knock. 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 My blood ran cold. Not 3 this time. 4. A different rhythm. A deliberate change. They were playing with me. My hands were clammy, my fingers slipping against my phone screen as I fumbled to open it. Should I peek through the blinds? Would I see something I shouldn't? Every horror movie I had ever watched screamed at me to stay still, to not look, but My curiosity gnawed at me with razor-sharp teeth. I could feel the thing outside, because that's what it was now, not a who or what. The next knock was heavier, slower, as if they were inside the walls now, pressing against them, testing their strength. And in between the beats of silence, I swore I heard something else. A whisper. Low, garbled. Words I couldn't quite make out. But somehow, I knew they were meant for me. My stomach lurched. I couldn't take it anymore. My shaking fingers finally dialed 911. And then, the doorknob rattled. I finally made the decision. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my fingers shaking as I pressed each number. The line rang once, twice, before a calm voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My voice trembled as I forced out the details, the knocks, the shadow, the suffocating silence between them. The operator told me to stay on the line, to wait for the police, to remain calm. But how could I? And then, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was heavy, pressing, unnatural. The air itself felt charged, like something was waiting. And then came a new sound. A slow, deliberate scraping against the glass. My blood turned to ice. I turned my head, hesitant, terrified, and my stomach lurched. The figure was gone, but the sound remained. Something was still there, dragging across the window in long, drawn-out strokes like nails against a coffin lid. The operator's voice crackled in my ear, distant now, drowned out by the rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. The room was dead silent again. And then I heard it. Not from the window, not from outside, but from inside the house. Story 2. It was late. Too late. The roads were empty as I drove home from my friend's house, the streetlights casting eerie shadows that flickered and danced along the pavement. The night was quiet, save for the hum of my engine. But then, I noticed it. A car. Its headlights glared in my rearview mirror. Too bright, too close. At first, I thought nothing of it. Just another late-night driver. But as I continued down the winding roads of my quiet neighborhood, the car remained behind me, too close. It followed every turn I made, never falling back, never overtaking. The unease in my chest tightened. I switched lanes. The car did too. I took an unnecessary turn. So did they. A chill crawled up my spine. This wasn't a coincidence. I pressed the gas, my hands gripping the wheel, trying to shake them off. But no matter how fast I went, the headlights stayed locked onto me, an unrelenting predator in the dark. I knew a shortcut, an alley that could get me home faster. It was narrow, lined with towering fences and overgrown trees, but it might be my only way to escape. I veered left, my tires screeching against the pavement as I sped into the alley. For a brief moment, hope flared in my chest. But then, the headlights followed. The walls of the alley seemed to press in, suffocating. The car behind me stayed close, unwavering, never once slowing down. My pulse pounded in my ears as I realized there was a dead end ahead. I slammed on the brakes, my car skidding to a stop. The world fell into silence. The other car stopped too. I sat there, breathless, paralyzed. My shaking fingers hovered over the glove compartment where my phone was, but I didn't dare move. And then, the headlights turned off. The darkness that followed was absolute. I couldn't see a thing. No glow from a dashboard, no silhouette of a driver, just black, empty night. I held my breath, my ears straining for anything. Then, the sound of tires rolling forward. Slowly, deliberately. The car inched closer. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream. But I could do nothing except wait. The tires stopped. The silence stretched on. And then, a soft click. The sound of a car door unlocking. But not mine. The one behind me. My stomach twisted in sheer terror. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. If I turned on my engine, I'd make noise. If I sat still, I'd be trapped. My lungs burned as I forced myself to stay silent. And then, something moved outside my window. A shadow. A figure. It wasn't coming from the car. It was coming from the trees. Something had been waiting in the alley. And now, it was coming for me. 12:35 a.m. I shifted the car into reverse, my hands trembling as I slowly backed up, my eyes darting between the rearview mirror and the suffocating darkness around me. The alley was silent, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed down on me. The thought of the car returning, of it lurking just beyond my vision, sent icy tendrils of dread creeping up my spine. As I turned the corner and rolled onto the main road, I exhaled, but the relief was shallow. The darkness felt thicker now, pressing in from all sides. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift, as if something unseen was moving just beyond my sight. The rest of the drive home was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every pair of headlights in the distance made my pulse spike. Each passing car felt too familiar, as if it had been there before, watching. I checked the rearview mirror constantly, expecting to see those same blinding beams locked onto me again. But there was nothing. It should have comforted me. It didn't. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I locked the doors with shaking hands, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Safe. I was safe. I told myself. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the headlights again. Too close, too bright. I felt the hum of an unseen engine, heard the slow crunch of tires on gravel. Even in the silence of my bedroom, I swore I could hear the faint whisper of movement outside my window. Even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling that the car was more than just a random driver. Something about it felt wrong, deliberate. I tell myself it's over, that it was just paranoia. But sometimes, late at night, I'll glance outside and see a pair of headlights parked at the end of the street. Not moving, just waiting. Story 3. I was about to head to bed when something made me stop. A whisper of unease, a shiver crawling up my spine. I turned, my gaze drifting to the window, and froze. A man stood just beyond the glass door, completely still, silent. His face was devoid of emotion, his eyes locked onto mine. He didn't knock, didn't call out, he just stared. A cold dread settled deep in my gut. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was a lost stranger, a drunk neighbor. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, he was real. The dim glow of the porch light cast a faint halo around his unmoving figure. I could see the rise and fall of his chest, the faint breath fogging against the cool night air. He was watching me, and he knew I was watching him. My fingers twitched toward my phone. Should I call someone? Open the door? Demand an explanation? Number A, deep primal instinct, screamed at me to stay very, very still. The man didn't move, didn't shift his weight, didn't blink. The silence felt unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I finally found my voice, small, shaking. Who are you? He didn't answer. I took another step back. His head tilted, just slightly, like a predator watching its prey react. My heart slammed against my ribs. I reached for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands, my gaze never leaving the man's face. The dispatcher answered, their voice distant compared to the roaring blood in my ears. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man on my porch, I whispered, my throat dry. He's just standing there, watching me. The dispatcher's voice remained calm, reassuring. Stay inside. Help is on the way. But the words felt empty, because the man knew. His eyes, deep black voids, held something unnatural, something wrong. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. He wasn't just some stranger. He'd always been watching, waiting. The minutes stretched endlessly. My ears strained for the sound of sirens, but all I could hear was the deafening silence of my own home. Then, the man's fingers twitched. The first movement he'd made, a slow, deliberate twitch, like a decision had been made. A sickening realization settled in my stomach. He wasn't waiting to knock. He was waiting for something else. The air in the room felt suffocating. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to hide, but my feet were frozen in place. The sirens, finally, began to wail in the distance. Relief swelled in my chest, but the man remained unbothered. His eyes didn't flicker. His body didn't tense. He simply turned, slow, unnatural, before stepping off the porch. Not running, not hesitating, just walking away. The moment he disappeared into the shadows, the spell broke. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. When the police arrived, they searched the area. There was nothing. No footprints. No signs of anyone ever being there. It was like he had never existed at all. The officers asked me to describe him, but what could I say? I couldn't recall his features. Not really. Just the eyes. Empty. Unblinking. A bottomless void. They never found him. And I never saw him again. But at night, when I glance at the glass door, I still feel it. The weight of something watching. Waiting. For the night, I forget to lock the door. For the night, it decides to return. Story 4. It was one of those late nights that seemed to stretch endlessly. The office was nearly empty, save for the dull glow of my computer screen and the overhead fluorescent lights that flickered occasionally. The hum of the air conditioning filled the silence, an ever-present background noise that only seemed to emphasize how alone I was. The stack of paperwork on my desk had been steadily growing, and exhaustion was beginning to set in. I needed a break. I picked up my phone, scrolling mindlessly in search of a distraction, when the sudden shrill ring of the office phone shattered the quiet. The sound jolted me, my pulse spiking for just a second. No one ever called this late. Hesitantly, I reached for the receiver, my fingers hovering over it, before I finally answered. Hello? Silence. I frowned, listening intently. The line was still open, but there was nothing. No breathing, no static. Just a heavy emptiness stretching out on the other end. My grip on the phone tightened. Hello? I tried again, my voice firmer this time. Then, just as I was about to hang up, I heard it. A whisper. Sarah. My name, spoken so softly, it was almost lost in the quiet. The voice was low, breathy, too intimate, too close. My skin prickled with unease as I glanced around the office. half expecting someone to be lurking in the shadows. But I was alone. I swallowed, trying to steady myself. It had to be a prank, some bored coworker messing with me. But something about the voice unsettled me. It was familiar, not in the way a friend or colleague would be, but in a way that gnawed at the edges of my memory, just out of reach. Shaking my head, I placed the receiver back down and took a deep breath. I was overthinking. It was late, and my exhaustion was playing tricks on me. A few minutes passed. I forced myself to focus, trying to shake off the lingering unease, but my concentration was fractured. The office felt different now, less like a familiar workspace, and more like something foreign, something watching. Then, the phone rang again. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it ring and fade into silence. But curiosity, fear, won out. With a trembling hand, I picked up the receiver. Hello? My voice came out quieter than before. Another pause. Then, the whisper returned. Sarah. I slammed the phone down, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. My entire body was tense, my hands clammy. This wasn't a prank. No one else was here. No one should have even had this number. My mind raced through possibilities. Was someone watching me? Had they been watching me for longer than I realized? My eyes darted toward the glass-walled conference room, then to the hallway leading to the exit. Every shadow felt sharper, more pronounced. I needed to leave. Grabbing my coat, I moved quickly, forcing myself not to look over my shoulder. I was just being paranoid, I told myself, just tired. But as I reached the door and pushed it open, I froze. The phone was ringing again. The sound cut through the air, louder than before. Insistent. I didn't wait. I stepped out into the night, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. The ringing stopped the moment I left. I never went back to that office.